Good.
All right, so now that we're off the rower here, just kind of understanding the fundamental movements that Aaliyah was talking about on the rower was basically that you have to get this hip hinge at some point in the movement, just as if we were teaching somebody to kind of deadlift first, or even just how to load the hips before dropping into a squat, is that it's not, and she showed this really well, is that if you don't get this little hip piece to the movement, then what you're going to do is kind of leave your hips behind, you're going to get round. And what I see a lot is that people will just load their knees, and that leads to a lot of these patellofemoral symptoms. And then the quads are going to get used, you can't work around that, but you don't have to have the quads be the only thing that get used. And that's one of the things that just loading those hips with that initial hip hinge right after the arms really makes a huge difference there. So now it becomes a combination of sharing the posterior chain with the quads and the anterior chain, and you're always going to be more powerful because you're using more muscles, but you're also going to share the load and not put all the load right on the patellofemoral region there. So in order to be able to do that, you got to make sure first, can you get the mobility to actually get into this position? And a lot of people actually can't, so we can cue them, but they just can't do that. So a good assessment is just, can you keep a nice flat back and at least get pretty close to below the shins, just in thinking about that, you'd actually have to be able to reach the handle pretty close to the damper there. So you want to be able to have that ability to keep a flat spine without rounding and having to bend the knees too much there. So one of the mobility drills we can do for that, if that's a limitation, is you can get into a band chair and then just floss the hip and work on getting the femur bone, which is the thigh bone, back into the socket. We could start with try to mobilize into the position that you're actually trying to work, which would be a hip hinge here, and then I can kind of bias either one leg back a little bit, or what works better is this one leg forward, because now I can get a lot more pressure of this specific hip back into the socket, and I'm stretching and tensioning all the muscles I would need to tension to really get some force when I'm coming in the other direction. I can also think about it from the other way, is if I want to put a little bit of tension here, I can hinge and kind of assist in the upward motion to get this glute firing. Alright, so now I'm actually mobilizing the hip from the other direction. Alright, so we can go forward, get the hip back through the hip here, we get the femur back into the socket, we're also tensioning all the muscles in the posterior chain, and just always make sure that you're not crumbling from the spine here. So it's just a pure hip hinge, pull up, and then when you pull up, now you get the muscles that you need to tension and contract, create that power. So you can start with this slow, just feel the tension, and then you can actually, as a warm-up, move a bit faster, so you can start generating some force from those muscles. Do it on both sides. Alright, so that's one way to get the hips involved. You also want to retest afterwards and just see if it's any better. Alright, the other thing is to just prevent, you're going to be using your quads a lot, so to prevent the over-tensioning of the quads, which go over top of the kneecap, and to try to minimize some of that compressive force onto the kneecap, you can roll out the quads. So if you're doing this before you row, you want to find some of the spots, you want to make it pretty active. Alright, so you don't calm your body down too much. You find a spot doing an active release where you can just really kick back and forth, move to some of the areas that are more restricted and tight, especially right around the knee, the inside of the knee. It depends on the person, you'll have different restrictions. And then you can roll to the side, because the side of the knee will tend to get some tension. Alright, so if I'm over here, and we've got the IT band area, or the vastus lateralis, which is the outside of the quadricep where it kind of meets with the IT band, you can find some restrictions and kick out. So loosening those areas up can really prevent overuse of the knee, or even if your form is a little off, you can save yourself some compression on those kneecaps. Alright, so there's plenty of other mobility issues that we can go over, and we have touched on a lot of the faults nicely, but those are some good things to really start on, especially if we want to prevent the knee issues.